Welcome everyone to episode 111 of EDH Commander Challenge. I'm your host, BT. Now, before we get to today's semi-final matchup, which will determine who will be our final two in the tournament and will face off for the Undisputed Championship, I have a question for you guys, our viewers, as well as our subscribers and such. Now, a question we receive on the channel very often is, why are you using multiplayer rules for 1v1 when there already exists a separate format, often referred to as either French ban list or dual commander? Well, the truth is, and I've always said this, is the fact that when we first started getting into Commander, we were watching David McDarby versus Danny West on the original Commander Versus. Of course, it's still a great series which features 4 people now in the usual multiplayer format of Justin Parnell, John Suarez, Stephen Green, and Jeremy Noel. But out of habit, I guess you could say, we just stuck to the 1v1 because we loved it. But that was back when we had, 7 subscribers and never thought that anyone would ever watch this. But 2.5 years later, we're sitting at almost 1,300, which is, we're getting halfway to 2,000 here. So we really want to hear what you guys want to watch, because without you, there'd be no BT Game Night and there would be no EDH Commander Challenge. So we'd like you to let us know in the comments down below, or reach out to us on Twitter if you have that. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, by the way, what you'd like to see going forward. Of course, we're definitely going to continue to have multiplayer matches every now and then, because we love to do that too. But for our 1v1, we want to know if you want to see business as usual, or if you would like us to move on and start doing dual commander matches, something that you would normally see at your local LGS tournaments if they had such for 1v1. So once again, let us know in the comments down below. Do you want to see what we've been doing as always, or do you want to see dual commander? Appreciate that greatly. But for now, let us get to our semi-final matchup, which will probably be the most competitive you've seen this tournament thus far. And let's go check out those opening hands. First, in this corner, with an opening hand of Breeding Pool, Misty Rainforest, Extract, Llanowar Elves, Birds of Paradise, Mana Crypt, Deathrite Shaman, and his Berg-style general, the First Sliver. He is the foil deck fanatic himself, Greg. And his opponent in this corner, with an opening hand of a Swamp, a Forest, Bajuka Bog, Jiraga Tree Speaker, Vampiric Tutor, Demonic Tutor, Mana Crypt, and his Golgari style Meren of Clan Nel Toth. Please welcome the fearless Sir Armen. Armen on the dice roll to start us off. Let's begin the last semi-final card fight. For their starting turns, Armen plays a Forest and casts Jiraga Tree Speaker and Mana Crypt, while Greg pays 2 to play Breeding Pool untapped and cast Deathrite Shaman. Greg calls the dice roll on Armen's crypt roll correctly, causing him to take 3 damage. Then Armen plays a Swamp and levels his Jiraga to 1. Next, he casts Demonic Tutor to search and cast Sylvan Library before passing. Greg plays Misty Rainforest and passes. This time, Armen takes no damage from his crypt, but pays 8 life to his Sylvan Library to keep the extra 2 cards from it. Then he plays a Forest and passes. Greg sacks his Rainforest to grab a Watery Grave tapped during the end step. Greg casts Extract, exiling Eternal Scourge from his deck, and passes. During the end step, Armen casts Chord of Calling, where X is 3, but Greg casts Flusterstorm with a storm count of 3, which Armen doesn't have enough mana to pay for the spell copies, and thus the chord is countered. Armen continues to spend that cash with his library, paying 8 life to keep his extra 2 cards. He plays a Swamp and casts an Invocation foiled out Diabolic Intent, sacking his Jiraga to it, and tutors a card from his deck to his hand. Before he tutors it, I remind him about his crypt trigger. Greg calls the roll correctly, and Armen takes 3. Then he casts a foil, I think Japanese Llanowar Elves, and passes. Jeez, these guys have so many foils. Greg plays a Gemstone Mine and casts a foil Birds of Paradise, and passes. Greg calls the crypt roll correct again, and Armen takes 3 more damage. He doesn't pay for any extra cards in his library this time. He then plays Ancient Tomb. Man, this guy has no fear. And casts Deathrite Shaman. Oh, that's why. And passes. Greg casts Preordain and bottoms both scryed cards before drawing a card. Then casts his own Llanowar Elves. What is this? MTG Blackjack? I see your foil Japanese Llanowar and I raise you a DCI promo? Oh my goodness, these two. Anyway, then Greg plays the most beautiful Lotus Petal I have ever seen before passing. During the end step, Armen spends more cash casting Vampiric Tutor, paying 2 life to tutor a card at the top of his deck. Greg calls the crypt roll correct yet again, and Armen takes 3 more damage. Surprisingly unfazed, however, Armen pays no life into his library and simply plays Bojuka Bog, exiling Greg's graveyard, and passes. Greg starts his turn by casting his general, the First Sliver. He then cascades into Mystical Tutor. He casts it and places Mana Drain on the top of his deck. Meanwhile, Armen casts Abrupt Decay, targeting Greg's Shaman. In response, Greg sacks his Petal for a black and uses his Shaman to exile Armen's Vampiric Tutor. But Armen responds by using his Shaman to do the same thing. This causes Greg's Shamans to fizzle before it dies. Then Greg loses 2 life before passing. For once, Armen takes no damage from his crypt, and he keeps no extra cards from his Sylvan library. Then he finally casts his general, Meren. Next, he evokes a Shriekmaw, killing Greg's Birds of Paradise, while also gaining his first experience counter. Then, he passes. During his end phase, he gets to bring Jiraga back to play thanks to Meren's trigger. Greg casts his own copy of Mana Crypt and goes for the kill by casting Food Chain, and sacks his Sliver to it to cast Eternal Scourge to start comboing off. However, Armen was ready for this and casts Frozen Grip, to which Greg wants to cast his Mana Drain on, but can't because Armen has 2 words for him: Split Second. Armen does take 2 damage from his tomb, but as you can see, it's well worth it. Food Chain is destroyed, and then the Scourge comes into play as Greg passes. Greg calls the crypt roll correct again, and Armen's life total looks pretty much like my paycheck after buying a bunch of cards at my local game store. He keeps no extra cards from his library, and casts Viscera's Seer. He then sacks it to itself to scry 1 and gain another experience counter. Then he passes and brings the Seer back to play with Meren's trigger during the end step. Armen called the crypt roll correctly, and Greg takes 3 damage. With nothing he can play, he simply passes. During the end step, Armen uses his Shaman to exile Greg's Shaman from his graveyard to gain 2 life. Armen takes no damage from his crypt this time, and takes no extra cards from his Sylvan library. He then casts his own copy of Birds of Paradise, and sacks his Viscera's Seer to itself again to scry 1, placing the card on the bottom of his library, and gaining his 3rd experience counter. He then reanimates the Seer again during his end step with Meren after passing. Greg also takes no damage from his crypt, and simply passes. During his end step, Armen uses his shaman to exile the Birds of Paradise from Greg's graveyard to gain 2 more life. Armen takes no damage from his crypt and no extra cards from his Sylvan library. He attempts to resolve Skull Clamp, but Greg pays 2 life to cast Mental Misstep, countering it. Armen then sacks his birds to his Seer to scry 1 and bottoms the card. He repeats the process, sacking his elves, gaining 2 more experience counters before passing and bringing Shriekmaw back to play with Meren during the end step, killing Greg's elves. Greg takes no damage from his crypt, but sadly, like his last 2 turns, he has no spells he can cast and is forced to pass. Greg calls the crypt roll correct, and Armen takes 3 damage. He takes no extra cards from his library. He plays Verdant Catacombs and levels up his Jiraga to 1. Then he moves into the first combat of the game and attacks with Meren and Shriekmaw. Greg declares no blocks and takes the damage. Armen passes and reanimates his birds during the end step. Greg takes no damage yet again from his crypt, then plays City of Brass and passes. During the end step, Armen uses his shaman to exile Greg's Llanowar to gain 2 life, and pays 1 life to sack his Catacombs to grab Bayou from his deck into play. Again, Greg, who by this point should go to the casino because he only knows how to call things right, calls the crypt roll correct and Armen takes 3 more damage. During the end of Armen's draw step, Greg casts Silence to prevent Armen from casting spells this turn. Thus, Armen moved to combat and attacks with Meren and Shriekmaw again. Again, Greg doesn't block and takes all the damage. Then Armen passes and reanimates his Llanowar during the end step with Meren. Armen finally calls the crypt roll correct and Greg takes 3. In need of a blocker, Greg hardcasts Elvish Spirit Guide and passes. During the end step, in a desperate need of a life gain source, Armen sacks his Llanowar to his Seer to scry 1, which goes to the bottom, and then exiles it with his shaman to gain 2 life. Greg called the crypt roll correct again, and now Armen's life total stands at death's door. He takes no extra cards from his library, and then Armen plays Llanowar Waste as his land. He then moves into combat and attacks with the same 2 creatures. Greg blocks Meren with his Scourge, and thus only takes 3. During his second main, Armen casts Liliana Heretical Healer, but Greg counters it with the mana drain that he got earlier, gaining 3 colorless mana for his next main phase, but takes 1 damage from his City of Brass. Armen then casts Sidisi Undead Vizier, exploiting his Shriekmaw, getting another experience counter, and tutoring the apparent game-ending card to his hand. He then passes, intending to win in his next turn. During the end step, Armen reanimates Shriekmaw, targeting Greg's Spirit Guide. Greg decides to make a risky play in response and casts Demonic Consultation, naming Yawgmoth's Will. He exiles his top 6 cards and then will continue to exile cards until the named card is revealed, which could be the last card in his deck, or even in the first 6, which would instantly lose him the game. Thankfully for Greg, it's not in the first 6, and after exiling an additional 38 cards, the will is finally revealed. Then Shriekmaw kills his Spirit Guide to complete the turn. Greg takes no damage from his crypt, then uses 2 of his 3 colorless mana from his mana drain, and 1 black to cast Yawgmoth's Will, leaving him with 1 colorless mana floating. This gives him access to playing cards from his graveyard this turn. He starts by recasting his beloved Food Chain, followed by Lotus Petal, which he sacks for 1 mana, and then pays 1 life to use his Brass for 1 mana, along with his floating colorless for his 3rd, and recasts his Eternal Scourge. Armen then declares the game is over. He casts Beast Within to destroy the food chain, which wins him the game. Which is what I would have said if Greg hadn't cast Pact Negation to counter the spell. And now, as Armen knows that the infinite mana First Sliver Goblin Bombardment or Aetherflux Reservoir combo is coming, he decides to scoop it up, ending a hard-fought match as Greg has now punched his ticket to the finals. Booyah! That match was very close and one of the best I have ever witnessed. Armen proved he's a top-tier player, trying to play around all of Greg's counterspells. But in doing so, the game dragged on for a bit, and the Mana Crypt, which usually is one of the best cards in the game, proved to be a double-edged sword for Armen and drained away most of his life. His Deathrite Shaman seriously kept his neck above water, gaining him life and taking away potential resources from Greg. Without it, he would have died much earlier, and by his own card effect, no less. Greg truly is the comeback kid. Just like his first match, he looked nearly dead in the water after his first food chain was destroyed. And while many of his cards deserve the MVP spot here, I'm going to award a tie to Demonic Consultation and Pact Negation. While Yawgmoth's Will did bring back the combo, the card was buried over 40 cards deep into Greg's deck. And having just enough mana to be able to redo the combo, and being tapped out and facing down a Beast Within, well, it would have all been for naught if not for that unexpected Pact Negation swooping in to save the day. You agree with our picks? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoy our content, consider becoming a patron. Give you access to some sweet bonuses while helping out the channel at the same time. Also, don't forget guys to let us know in the comments or on Twitter if you want us to continue doing matches just like this, or if you wanted to see us switch to dual commander rules. Thanks everyone. Thanks for watching guys, hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you're a fan of EDH gameplay and you like whether it be 1v1 or multiplayer and you want to be part of the ever-growing Commander Challenge family, just make sure you smash the subscribe button and notification bell down below. We do weekly videos. Don't forget as well to like, comment, share our videos, but most importantly, enjoy them. On behalf of all of our members here, I'm your host BT. Feel free to check out all of the videos in the channel, join our game, it's now your turn. Cheers!